Hi guys, Kelly here, and I want to share with you my most recent reads. And if you saw my last recent reads video, you know that in March I am reading almost exclusively middle grade books. And so far I have read 7 middle grade books, and I have only rated 2 of them less than 4 stars. So I am having a great reading month so far. I will tell you specifically later like what I think has become my niche in middle grade. But today I have 4 books to share with you. I'm going to talk about these in order from the book I liked the least to the book I liked the best. So the first book is When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. I'm not sure how you say her last name. And this book is really hard to describe what it's about, because if you read what the synopsis says, the stuff that is in the synopsis doesn't even start happening until about 60 pages in. And this is only a 200-page book. So that to me feels kind of spoilery. And then if you go on Goodreads and look at like reviews, almost every review mentions a theme of this book that actually doesn't happen to the last 50 pages. And so that feels spoilery. So if I was just gonna say what this is about in the first 50 pages, because I feel like in a 200-page book, that's all you should be talking about. This is a book about a girl named Miranda. She's a 6th grader, and almost her entire life she's been best friends with her neighbor Sal. They've been basically like inseparable, the only friends to each other. And then one day Sal just stops talking to her and kind of is taking a break from their friendship. And so she has to start making new friends and interacting with other people in her school that she's never really talked to. So she is starting to figure out who she wants to be friends with, making a new group of friends, you know, kind of that whole coming of age, learning who she is, who she wants to be around, and about friendship. There's also a lot of stuff about her family, like her mom is going to be on the, what is that show called? The $20,000 Pyramid or whatever. I don't know. It was a show from the 70s, hosted by Dick Clark. I cannot remember what it's called, but her mom got accepted to be on that show, so there's a lot of like them at home rehearsing for the show and stuff like that. And that's pretty much all I feel like I can tell you without being spoilery. And so that's why it's really hard to talk about this book, because that's really not that interesting when you hear about it. All the interesting stuff happens later. And that really is the problem I had with this book. I gave this 2 stars, and I am very much the unpopular opinion, because this is not only a Newbery Award winner, I think it won it in 2010, and if you look on Goodreads, sorry the light is like getting really bright and shiny, but if you look on Goodreads, it almost universally gets 4 and 5 stars, but I just don't get it. I get the book, I don't get why it's so popular or well loved. Like, so for me, nothing happens really in this book until the last 50 pages. And yes, okay, so when I said that the synopsis part, this part does start happening about the 60-page mark, but it's not really like creating any kind of suspense or excitement until like literally the last 50 pages are the only thing that captured my attention. I almost gave up on this book several times, but I'm like, it's a Newbery winner. Everybody loves it. I want to find out why everybody loves it. And I just don't feel like that's good writing if only the last 50 pages are interesting. Because I do agree the last 50 pages were great, but at a 200-page book, that's only 1/4 of the book. That's not 5 stars to me. And, you know, maybe other people liked the beginning part, but I just felt it was very boring. Like like she is a very bland character to me. Like, I don't think I could tell you any real distinguishing characteristics about Miranda, and we're in her head the whole time. So I didn't really like feel she was a very interesting character. Her friends were also kind of just blah. Like the new friends she makes, I mean, I probably don't even remember their names, and I just read this last night. So I just didn't get invested in it until the very end, and then that was too late. There's also, like, this is kind of a contemporary, but there is, like, a sci-fi element, but that is the part that, like, is in the last half of the book, so I don't even think I could tell you what the sci-fi element is. So, yeah, it's just a hard book to rate and review. This is the 2nd Newbery winner that I have read in the last year that I actively disliked, and so I'm kind of losing faith a little bit in the Newbery Award. I'm hoping to read a couple others that will raise my opinions of it, hopefully. But yeah, this one was not for me. Editing Kelly here. I just wanted to input one more thing about this book that really bothered me, and that was our main character's favorite book is A Wrinkle in Time, and she talks about it a lot in this book, and to the point of like giving exact plot points and spoiling the entire end of the book. And I know that some people think it's okay to talk in spoilery detail about books that are older because they're like, oh, people should just know what those books are about. Well, I've never read A Wrinkle in Time, and I was actually planning on reading it this month for middle grade March, and so now I'm just like really angry because I read this book I didn't even like, and it spoiled for me a book that I was planning on reading in the next couple weeks. And so that's another reason that I'm really angry at this book. So if you are somebody who has not read Wrinkle in Time yet, do not read this book first, or else you will learn every single thing that happens in A Wrinkle in Time, because it is that much detail. And that's it. All right, and then we're going to get to books I actually liked. So what I was saying earlier about, like, of the 7 books I read, I think I found what I love in middle grade, which is fantasy. Because middle grade fantasy takes chances and goes places that you might not expect. It doesn't always fit into, like, the tropes that, like, YA fantasy fits into, because kids have a wide imagination, so they can kind of go wherever they want. And that's what I found I really love. And so my next one is a middle grade fantasy book, and that is Alanna, the First Adventure by Tamora Pierce. And Tamora Pierce is a very popular middle grade and young adult fantasy writer that I think was writing back in like the 80s and 90s, but I never read her stuff. The way this series works is the first book is middle grade, and then the next 3 kind of venture more into the YA like category, because she's growing up, the main character, and getting into like more topics that would be appropriate for older kids. So this is the only one that's really middle grade, and I gave this one a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. This is about a girl named Alanna who has a twin brother, and they are at the age, I think they're like 11 when they start out, and they are at the age where they are being sent off to like kind of learn what they're going to do when they grow up. So she was supposed to be sent to this like finishing school, and he was supposed to be sent to be a knight. And she is the one that really wants to be a knight. She wants to fight, she wants to be brave, but at this time girls are not knights. And so she pretends to be her brother, because her brother also does not want to be a knight. Her brother wants to be a sorcerer. So they decide to kind of switch places, because she was going to go to the place where sorcerers learn, is where her like finishing school is. So they basically switch places, and she becomes Alan instead of Alanna. And so Alanna goes dressed as a boy to the palace to become a knight, while her brother goes to the convent where he will learn how to like be a sorcerer. And we're following Alanna and her journey from being a page into being a squire as she tries to become a knight. And so we're following her over about, I think, a 2-year or so period in this book, and all the struggle she's going through, because she's surrounded by boys, she's assumed to be a boy, but at the same time, she's going through puberty, so there's that to struggle with. Like, she's kind of like fighting the fact that her body is telling her that she is a girl, but she's like, I really want to do this job that is meant for boys. And it's, you know, she just goes through a lot of adventure, she meets friends, there's magic involved. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was an exciting read, because there's a lot of stuff that happens to her and her friends. She meets a lot of fun characters, and it really set up, I think, the story for the rest of the series, and got me excited to read about her adventures when she's a little older and can be like really fighting and out there. So I am excited to read the rest of the story. The reason I gave it a 4 instead of a 5 is because since this book kind of covers several years, and is her kind of learning about being a knight, there's a lot of times when it feels like we're just glossing over stuff really quickly, like we're moving fast from one scene to another, to cover more ground, and also to try to cram in a lot of like story to give you kind of the setup for the world in order to continue the series. And so it felt a little rushed at times, and I think also because she's writing it for a younger audience, that might have rushed it a bit too. And also the other thing I didn't love is that she has this group of friends that is like the prince and a thief and like some other squires that she has become buddies with. And I didn't feel like we really got to know them that well. I mean, they're mentioned a ton in the book. She spends a lot of time with them, but I don't feel like I really got to know them as characters. And I would have liked to have maybe had some more like day-to-day life so that we could have like really gotten to know their personalities. But since you're coming so much time, you have to get to the big events. And when you're doing like a big, exciting like adventure, you're not going to really focus on the personalities, you know what I mean? So we really got to know Alanna, and I really loved Alanna and her, like, stubbornness and her, like, inner strength that she had. But I didn't feel like we got to know those around her, and I feel like that some of those characters are going to come up later, so I really wanted to, like, invest in them as well. So I did enjoy this, and I will continue on with the series. And then next, I don't have the next book. It's called Harbor Me by Jacqueline Woodson. And I listened to this on audiobook, which I would highly recommend the audiobook. It was a full cast, and it was an excellent listen. And it's really short. It probably is only like a 4-hour audiobook, and if you speed it up a little bit, like, because it was read kind of slow, I thought, so I was able to speed it up to 1.5 speed, so it went by really quick and felt like you were really there with these kids. So what this story is about, it doesn't really have much of a plot, but basically it's like these 6 kids in 5th grade who they all have some sort of like learning disability. So like some of them might be ADHD, or some of them might, I don't know, they don't really express what all their issues are, but they all had some like learning difficulties. And so this teacher on every Friday puts them in this room and says, you could just spend time talking to each other about whatever you want, alone with no adults. And so they do this every Friday, and you know, like you would expect at the beginning, they kind of split into their pairs and their friends, or they might be playing on their phone, they might not be really interacting, but then eventually they start like sharing their stories with each other. So this book doesn't necessarily have a plot, but is more like listening to monologues of each person's experience, and they do interact with each other, so they're not just monologues, but it's really finding out every person's story. And I enjoyed it a lot. I think it's a book that right now would be important for like every elementary and middle schooler to read. I think it would be great for adults also, because it gives you insight about what kids nowadays really have to deal with. And I loved it. I mean, it covers so many topics. I mean, it goes from like parental incarceration to immigration and police profiling, bullying, like so many topics, because each one of these kids has a real individual story, and I just loved it. I loved to like hear these stories from the kids. Like, I know an adult is writing this book, and sometimes when you have these books written by adults for middle schoolers that have these serious topics, it feels very almost preachy, like this is an adult telling you how the world is and all that. But this, because it was like this conversation between these 6 kids, it felt like how the kids would really talk about it and react. Like, you know, especially when you're listening to the audiobook, you're hearing these 6 different people narrating, and they're like having a conversation and talking over each other and like, you know, really getting passionate about the things in their lives, and they're talking like kids talk. I mean, Jacqueline Woodson has kids that are like, I know she at least has one son that is about this age, so I think she really knows how kids talk and express themselves. And it just felt like you were in this room with these kids talking, and I just loved it. I thought it's a really important book right now, that, you know, kids' experiences now are different than when I was a kid. Not saying that things like that didn't happen, but it's just a different climate happening now, and every generation goes through different struggles, and I think this is just really important to see what this generation is dealing with right now on a day-to-day basis. And I would highly recommend it. Like I said, the audiobook is really short. And the other thing I really loved about the audiobook is at the end, there's an interview between the author and her 10-year-old son. And that was great. I loved the interview because her son is like leading the interview and asking questions, but then she's also asking her son, like, what did you like in the book? Do you think it's important? Like, she even asked him, like, do you think it's important for kids your age to be reading books with serious topics? Because some parents want to, like, shelter that age from things. And he's like, yeah, we don't want to be just sitting around reading fairy tales. We want to read about real stuff. And so I just really liked hearing an actual 10-year-old saying those words, because I think it's important for kids to be hearing real stories. Like, it's great to read the fairy tales. I read fairy tales still, but you also need to balance that out with stuff that is really happening in the world. And so I would highly recommend that book. Obviously, I'm gushing on about it. The only reason I gave it 4.5 stars instead of 5 is that there's 6 kids in the room, but there's one kid that I don't feel like they ever shared their story. And so I feel like they were just there as a conduit for like some of the other people. And so that kind of bothered me, because it felt like because this person had some money and had, you know, loving parents and things like that, that they didn't have a story to tell, which I don't think is accurate. Like, you don't have to have, like, to the level of, like, you know, deportation to have a story to tell. And so it was just kind of, it was a little minor thing that didn't, like, really take, it only took down half star. But it was just, like, all through the book, I kept thinking, why isn't this person talking, you know? So I just felt like we missed out on one story in the book. And I don't know if that was a purposeful choice, but it just, like, was something that was missing for me. All right, and then my last book, which was a 5-star, was The Prince and the Dressmaker by Wang. And this is a graphic novel, and I adored this. This was, like, probably the cutest graphic novel I've ever read. The best one I've ever read. Like, it was just everything I wanted. It was adorable. And basically what this is about a prince who hires this dressmaker because he likes to go out at night in dresses, and he becomes like another persona. He becomes Lady Castilia, and that is his like nighttime persona. He goes out and he gets to express himself through wearing beautiful dresses and wigs and all that stuff. And so he hires this dressmaker in secret, like basically to be his dressmaker, because nobody else in the kingdom or his parents or anybody knows that he likes to wear dresses. And it just really is a story about accepting people for who they are, and that, you know, it's okay. That what you are is okay. And I just loved it. I loved the friendship between the two. It was adorable. The family dynamics were great. Like, just so much about it just warmed my heart. I actually cried at one point. It's not like a very long, I think I read this in like an hour or less, and I still like teared up. I just adored it. I'll show you like some of the pictures at the beginning so you kind of see the like style of drawing. It was really cutesy, really like fairy tale like, and I adored it. This would also be good for kids. I would say maybe age 9 or 10 and up. I mean, it depends on your kids and what you think they can handle, because there is some drinking, and there is like kind of a romantic plot as well. So if you have kids younger than that, you might want to read it first to find out if you want to share it with them. But I would definitely say upper elementary would love it, and I thought it was great. So those are my 4 books that I have read in the last few days. I will see you with my next recent reads. Bye.